All right. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Collective Intelligence Block Party number 18. This is the 18th block party. Shoot, we'll be at 20 pretty soon. But anyway, great to see you all. Emery there in Montreal, Canada. James there in Cork, Ireland. Great to see you both. Everyone's welcome here. And I was just starting to speculate on well, first, let me let you guys say good morning. If there's any good mornings to be said, never any pressure to talk on the block party, as always. I've got a chipmunk here saying good morning. He certainly wants to be heard. Yeah.
Good morning from Montreal. Good morning. Morning.
Good morning and bonjour, Montreal. All righty. And I know James is a little busy taking care of stuff, so he'll say hello when he can. But anyway, I was kind of thinking that we could focus on three areas, just, in terms of just like this strategy for global transformation. So two are very human and the other is planetary. The human, food first, obviously food and water. And the other is, I would just say, everything in the realm of the socially progressive. So that includes social justice, right? It includes radical equality. It includes humanity coming together and getting to know each other and connecting and collaborating and co-creating through this medium of collective intelligence, evolving toward collective superintelligence, right? So anyway, that's all in the, I'll just call it the socially progressive, just for lack of a better word, right? Maybe I should call it the S&P 500 for the socially progressive 500, because there's 500 major areas that we need to get right if we're truly going to be socially progressive, right? Everything, all the areas spanning human rights, education, civil liberties, an end to racism, an end to classism and injustices of any kind, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, the socially progressive. See, food is food. If there's no food, forget about talking about anything else. You know what I mean? I mean, it's like, let's say I've got we've got a stereo system here, right? And, there's things I like about it and things I don't like about it and whatever, and things that are complicated and things that are simple. But if the darn thing doesn't even have power, if there's no electricity, you see how like every other aspect of that stereo system is just totally moot, right? That's what food is. That's what hunger is, right? If people don't have food, freaking forget about everything else, right? So it's kind of like level one is food. Level two is the S&P 500, socially progressive in all these myriad ways. And it's kind of like once you open that can of worms, right? With Black Lives Matter, as that progresses, well, shoot, suddenly out of the blue, you've got Cambodian lives matter, right? Hispanic lives matter. First Nations, Indigenous lives matter. All these lives matter. And so with the socially progressive, it's kind of like either you do it or you don't, right? And as a world, for the most part, we've been not doing it. And kind of the main justification for not doing it has been this sort of social Darwinism concept that basically...
Breaking up there, David.
Oh, am I breaking up? Am I breaking up? Emery, am I breaking up for you too?
Well, you were there for us a few seconds anyway. I missed what you said in the last sentence or so anyway.
Okay, let me just confirm with Emery if he has a similar experience. Emery?
My end is fine.
Oh, okay. I wonder if it's at your end, James, with the network there, because I'm on I'm on a high bandwidth connection here, connected directly via the wire, the Ethernet cable. So very high bandwidth here.
All right.
Okay.
All right,
Okay.
Damon.
Okay. Cool.
Probably me. It's me. All right. It's just got a message on the phone, so that's what I was going to grant. Sorry about that.
Gotcha. Anyway, so but what I was basically saying was, you've got food. That's like the base of the pyramid. Then you have all the S&P 500, all the socially progressive stuff that that basically says, look, are we going to work together as a species? Are we going to have inclusion and equality and democracy and basically love and respect for all people? Or are we going to stay fragmented with all kinds of injustice? And I was just commenting that it seems to me that the base of that, all that injustice today, not really the base, but perhaps the thing that gives it backbone today is the mode of production of the economy, which I call an economy of hoarding, right? Where the wealthy get to hoard more and more and more. They have access to, essentially all of the life-giving resources in terms of all the surpluses, right? And the rest of us are left, struggling to survive, scrambling to survive. That's the general trend. And now, obviously, there are countries that are more socially progressive where you don't really feel it that much, like the Scandinavian countries. Even Canada, relative to the United States, is much more progressive in terms of healthcare and basic human needs. But fundamentally, it's the economy of hoarding, which basically says, hey, if you're wealthy, good for you. And if you're not, it's your own fault, right? And that essentially becomes the bludgeon with which racism is deployed. Racism, sexism, ageism, speciesism, etc. Anyway, we've talked about this extensively. So in order for us to have true social progressive, to be truly socially progressive, I think we need to get radical. And the single most basic step toward the socially progressive is feeding everyone, right? That's just the foundation of it. So really, food is part of the S&P 500, the socially progressive, right? It's just step number one of 500 steps, right? Anyway, so that's the social. Go ahead, Emery.
Just want to say that in that process of feeding everyone, or making sure that food is number one, we also have to point out the fact that we need the conditions for growing the food in order. And I think that kind of precedes food, right? The conditions for growing food.
You're absolutely right, Emery. I love it. And one of the things I love about that is because now I'm envisioning this pyramid where at the bottom is, just imagine like a block of ice, right? We need this planet to be ice friendly, to support ice, right? To support the three phases of water, solid, liquid, vapor. Right now, we're losing our ice, a Fairweld ice, an end to ice. And we're just going to be left with liquid and vapor, and we can't support life with liquid and vapor. We need the solid, right? So solid ice representing the cool, food on top of that, and then all the rest of the S&P 500. Because we can't get any other of the S&P 500 unless we have the first two layers, right? I'm kind of imagining a pyramid where the first two layers are just really thick, massive, that take up maybe half of the weight of the pyramid, and then above that are all like a bunch of very thin layers that are the rest of the 500, the rest of the S&P 500. But you want to get socially progressive? You got to have food, and to have food, as Emery says, you got to have the conditions for producing food. So there you have it, the pyramid, the S&P 500. Yes, we want to be socially progressive and ecologically progressive. And to do that, number one and number two are food and the ability to grow food. And both of those are under severe collapse right now. It's as simple as that. So
according to Paul Beckwith's latest video a few hours ago there anyway, the signs are looking like, and the graphs that he was using, he said they were very they were well underestimated, and even at that they weren't looking good, but they're basically looking at an ice-free Arctic by September this year anyway, like for the month of September anyway. And what it'll do then is, once September goes, then it'll be September, August, and July. Then July, August, September, October, and that's it. Then the exponential heat takes over. Then, and it'll be, but definitely it's looking like the September will be the month for an Arctic, an ice-free Arctic. It's looking that way now.
yeah, and of course, September 20th is already solstice, and once we get past, not solstice, but equinox. Once we get past the equinox, obviously the days get shorter, and the disastrous effects of having an ice-free Arctic get less and less. But even in the month of September, the sun is still plenty high in September, right? And the impact of an ice-free Arctic will be felt. So you guys know that solution that I've been proposing and talking about putting basically the ping pong sized balls of hollow silica spheres that can float in the ocean. I've never actually seen one. I just know that they can be made, right? I have faith. I mean, it doesn't seem that hard. And encircling the Arctic sea ice with, basically a massive layer, one ping pong ball thick, ideally, but a massive layer of these silica spheres surrounding the Arctic ice. All right. You guys know what I'm talking about, right? I've talked about it enough. I haven't really.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're on about.
So my uncle yesterday came up with a name for that. Uncle Frank. He says, how about giving it the name Arctic Encirclement? Arctic Encirclement, because we're encircling the Arctic with these ping pong balls, which are in turn encased by a big oil boom, right? Anyway, Arctic Encirclement, in my mind, is fast becoming the obvious way to frickin' refreeze the Arctic and prevent it from complete collapse. You guys know what I mean? I mean, it's just like, because, the Yatao, relatively large floating mirror approach, that's going to take a lot of engineering and testing and this and that. And hey, there's arrays and they're held together by steel cable and all this kind of stuff. And how do we deal with that? What about the sea life? What about this? What about that? But the ping pong balls, on the other hand, right? You dump a bunch of ping pong balls in the Arctic. What's the issue? If some sea lion or seal needs to surface, they surface, and there's a few ping pong balls above them. Fine. If anything, it's like playtime. I don't want to oversimplify the complex, unanticipated consequences and whatnot, unintended consequences. But,
if you think about it, those balls are going to be there to replace ice that was there already. So in normal circumstances, there wouldn't have been birds looking for food there. There wouldn't have been seals coming up. There would have been seals coming up through the odd hole here and there. But those holes could also be allowed. You could also put a circlement of floats within the balls to keep the balls out of certain holes to allow breathing spaces for seals or whatever. Like, but you know what I mean? All those things could be thought of. But the ice, if the ice had been there wouldn't have been birds flying over it looking for food, nor would there be anything coming up through it either. So the balls are just basically replacing the ice. But I do reckon they should be bigger than ping pong ball size, because albatross and all that kind of thing, like, and well, out in the Arctic, no, I know you different types of birds, but they do eat stuff bigger than ping pong ball size. Like.
Yeah. And that's where we'd have to experiment a little bit. But, you know, we're getting to the point where, you know, it's like we're a bunch of firefighters scratching our heads standing outside the proverbial burning building. And like, well, we could blast it with water, but then it might damage some of the stuff inside the building. You know, it's getting to the point where the fire chief is about to show up and start screaming at the firefighters, blast the freaking building with the high power hoses already. Yes, I know some windows are going to be broken and some mattresses are going to get wet and some artwork is going to be ruined. I know that. But you know what? If we don't cool the flipping planet, there's going to be nothing left. So it's like, you know, at some point you just got to start dousing the damn building. And I like the firefighting analogy, because everybody knows if a house is on fire, you start blasting. You don't worry about breaking windows or getting mattresses wet. You start freaking blasting, because it's just there. The exponential of overheating and cooking and burning and destruction of the house and all life in it, humans, goldfish, plants, you name it, all of that, it's just so obvious in the case of a fire, right? But there's enough ignorant humans on Earth that for us collectively, it's not obvious yet. For us, it's obvious. That's why we're here every Friday, Saturday for 24 hours, right? It's obvious to us. And in the case of a fire in a house, it's obvious. And so it's already just an established playbook. You douse it. So we need to get to the mentality that it's not only okay to douse Mother Earth with cooling, but it's urgent. And yes, some windows are going to be broken and some mattresses are going to get wet. Anyway, I think you guys get my point. Going on mute.
Well, I come again to say, you know, to repeat my recent idea. I'm not ashamed to say it again, but I think we have to bring the ice from the Antarctic up to the Arctic. That's the simplest solution in my brain. Bring it up from the Antarctic, and there's plenty of technology now. Okay, where they're towing these monstrous icebergs, okay, to to places north from the Antarctic, and they're pretty successful in doing that. And I think that
wait, they're already doing that? They're already schlepping ice?
I've been doing research, and they're doing a bunch of that. But the mentality for doing it is based on providing fresh water. Okay, it's providing drinking water, but that's because of a lack of understanding for the graver problem, the bigger problem. Okay, yeah, water is fine to tow those icebergs to provide fresh water, but let's quadruple, let's do it 100 times more, and we could have trillions and trillions and trillions you know, your golf ball size, uh, you know, things there floating on the water, or whatever you want to do with it, you know. But I think it makes a lot more sense. It's gonna, and it's not harmful, you know. You're gonna have you're gonna have wildlife swallowing those balls, or you know, fish eating those damn things. I don't know if it's not foolproof for sure, and plus it's kind of like a polluting kind of thing to do, even though you're gonna have some effect there, which is positive, right? In the long term, it's a very pollutant type of thing to do, and you'll never get it out of the ocean again. You know, it's going to be a lot of work. Whereas you bring up the ice, that's the natural, that's the natural environment for the ice to be in. You know, it's cold up there, and even though there's a difference in elevation, okay, we're talking about the North Pole where, you know, you're it's an ocean, right? Basically speaking, surrounded by land. So the effect from the winds is more, you know, is more obvious that that's affecting, right? But you know, we got no other options here, very limited options, and we just got to do more of the what needs to be done. We got to bring the ice up to the north, you know, whatever it takes.
Yeah, good stuff. Good stuff, Emery. Yeah, and like I keep saying, and this is actually for me the most important point as regards SRM is we urgently need to put together a united front among the different SRM projects and proposals, including yours, Emery, for bringing ice up from the Arctic. We need to create a united front and say, look, far more urgent right now than arguing which SRM solution is better than the others is making our case collectively as a united front to the world that we need SRM, period. Right? Not in whatever form. No, we need to find the best form or the best combination of forms. But before we can get to that, we need the world to agree that we need SRM. And that's a much simpler conversation than the conversation of golf balls versus imported ice from Antarctica versus spraying stuff into the atmosphere versus Yatow's arrays of mirrors in the ocean versus Jamin's canopies of mirrors in the deserts, et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, but more on that soon.
Well,
Right now, it is.
I just want to add one quick thing.
Yeah.
You know, when there's a fire in the forest, in the bush, right? What do? They get those planes, and they fill it with water. They fill it with water, and they dump the water from the from lakes or whatever closest water source there is onto the fire. And that's, you know, think about it. It's just a bunch of planes or helicopters or whatever with a big bucket getting the water to put out the fire. You know, that's a big job, putting out a big fire, like, you know, but we're doing the opposite. We're getting the ice and we're putting out the fire.
Totally. Anyway, I trust you get my point, Emery, that yes, that's an urgent conversation, figuring out which SRM solution, but I'm arguing that even more urgent than that is that we argue for SRM as a whole, create a united front. Otherwise, the world's going to look at us SRM promoters as these guys can't even figure their act out internally. How the hell are we supposed to, you know, vote for them as a political party, the SRM party, let's say? Not a bad idea. Anyway, it's a couple minutes past the top of the hour. I want to welcome Ray from Toronto. And Ray, thank you for posting about the that Toronto is changing that ridiculous law that people can't grow food on their front lawns or whatever. Good stuff. Kelly, how you doing? Welcome. Oh my goodness. Now everyone, the Canadians have us outnumbered. James, take cover. The Canadians.
Our cat's here too, so we're three here.
Oh, who's there? Your cat?
Our cat, yeah, he's sulking. Where is he?
Wait, even your cat's Canadian? My goodness, I never heard of it.
He can't come on our lap.
Okay. It reminds me of when my dad was in the Navy. He was sailing around the world, and they stop in France at some port, and like one of his men, he comes back to the ship totally drunk, and he goes, "Man, these French people, they're so smart. Even the little kids speak French." Right? It's like, even your cat's Canadian? Man, I never heard of a Canadian cat before, dude. We don't really have those here in Southern California. Canadian cats.
I'd pick him up and show you, but then he'll just pop on us, and he's very heavy. Yeah. So once he's on us for hours.
I wonder if Canadian cats have like Canadian passports. I guess you'd call that like a cat port or something like that. Anyway. Hey, welcome, Silas. All righty. Well, why don't we start a new recording since we're at the top of the hour of Food Healers? I'll stop the previous recording anyway.